to the Bayview Podcast with hosts Andrew Clark and Chris Emery. This is designed to be a discussion on all things life and faith. We hope this serves as a weekly resource and encouragement to you.
What's going on, everybody? It is your host, Andrew, joined as always by Chris Emery, back with another episode of the Bayview Podcast. Thanks for listening and joining in with us today. Chris, how are you?
Man, I'm doing really well. I am. I'm doing good. How about you?
I am doing well as well.
Good.
So at the recording of this episode is almost the end of basketball season, which has been a great joy, but definitely ready to kind of have a little more space in the schedule. But doing well.
I think it'd be fun, but maybe what we need to do here in the next few weeks is once it wraps up, have you and get Coach Rainey back up here and just talk about not just basketball, certainly talk about some basketball, but just talk about the way you guys continue to view that as a way to invest in these kids, but also as an expansion of your ministry.
Sure, yeah.
There's a hot topic that's kind of been, it's not new, but it's kind of getting more momentum lately, and that is marketplace ministry.
Yeah.
And just exploring the reality that everyone is called to be part of the ministry mission.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're vocational in it or not is irrelevant. It's wherever you are. And so I certainly see coaching. I've coached a lot. I see coaching as one of the most beautiful opportunities to pour Jesus investment into people. Yeah. And I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome because I think, one of the I think you would view this across the board as an athlete or someone who's played sports or participated, especially in team sports, like the locker room and those kind of settings are kind of like sacred, like special places. Yeah. Like those are like you don't just bring everyone in the locker room; it's just the team. And so there is a side to it that's a very personal and almost intimate side of things. And so, there's a lot there. That's. I viewed this whole season very ministry mindset, like in terms of how of interacting and speaking to the guys and the language used and the impact beyond just the moment in that game or that practice, but like what's the bigger picture. And so it would be awesome if Coach Rainey, especially he's at 100 career wins now, which is honestly a really big deal for a varsity basketball coach.
Was that his last game that gave him that?
Yeah, he just again, when we were recording this, they had just beaten GTA a week or so ago and got the win, and it's 100 career wins.
How did I know that? I did not know that.
Yeah, that's just, but that's so he spent a lot of time in this space with athletes and outside of the church walls, really impacting the next generation. And so that's a great episode idea.
Yeah, we'll do that real soon.
Yeah, and part of it, we'll just transition it. Part of it of kind of being in the workplace, whether you are, for us, the workplace is the church, but for the person outside the church, it's like part of being a disciple is that you would take that. And we've talked about the idea of reflecting Jesus in all that you do. And we've been talking through the Beatitudes, and we've kind of completed that series. And today we'll talk about kind of the last beatitude, and it's interesting how you look resource wise if this is labeled as a beatitude or not, but
correct.
It really is that call that if you're a believer, you would be living this out, and part of being a disciple, a believer, whatever you want to call it, is bringing Jesus into your everyday life, that he would permeate your life. And so with that being said, kind of this last week we on Sunday, I had the chance to dive into the idea of blessed are those who are persecuted. Yeah. Which is maybe a buzzword in Christian society, and in that word, the idea of persecution and whatnot. But it was an interesting one to study and prepare for. And
well, and I think it's an important one because it is part of the Beatitudes. Like you said, some resources stop at blessed are the peacemakers. And maybe that is because this is less of a character trait. So the previous 7 are all things like, if you are going to be a follower of mine, if you're going to be my disciple, these are traits that, and it's not optional. Yep. These are traits that you must or will have. This is how you'll be known. Yep. And so that's important to understand that too, that this isn't 7 or 8 items that Jesus is saying, hey, it'd be great if you grabbed a couple. This is saying from the first one of blessed are the poor in spirit all the way through the end, this is what being a disciple looks like.
Yep.
And it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And so I do think this end one is important because it does fall under that same umbrella of it's all or nothing.
Yep.
And so I don't believe this would be read of blessed are those if you're persecuted.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's Jesus knew we'd be persecuted. His language is basically when you are persecuted. Like, so it's not, it's not this idea of, like you said, like, oh yeah, this might happen, or like, it is what it is. Like, it really is. There's this idea that you're a follower of Jesus. He was persecuted. He went through obviously some just incredibly terrible things and had some just really hateful experiences and all that stuff. Like, if that is our example, like if he is our, like, person we're trying to be most like, then why would we not expect to also face some form of persecution or hatred or whatever words you want to add in there? And he speaks to that being part of the life of a disciple.
Well, and I think that's important what you said there, in that it's an expected response. And not, I find so often it seems, and maybe I do this as well, Christians seem to speak of persecution as something that's coming.
Yeah.
So we talk, we have a lot of those conversations every time there's an election. God help us all, we're in an election year.
Yep.
Worst time, in my opinion, to be a church leader. Yep. But so people think like, well, if this changes or this election goes this way, persecution's coming. It may worsen, most certainly.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's something that's just out there floating and waiting. I mean, it's here.
Yep.
I think it affects us now. It may be very, very different.
Sure.
Than what people around the world experience.
Yeah.
I mean, if you read some of the stats, there are millions of Christians who are under heavy persecution right now today for their beliefs.
Yeah.
And yet the church thrives.
Yep.
We have it, but man, we talk so much about how bad it's going to be. Are we even ready for that? Like, we're getting persecuted now. I don't see Christians hardly handling this well.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, in most cases, at least in America, like, we're not worried about being killed for our beliefs, or even under intense torture or being chased down or any of that kind of stuff, And so, but in the same way, like, I think a couple of the definitions I used, like the idea of to persecute, like, just for a working definition, you have this idea of is to chase down. It's a presence that doesn't go away. It could be irritating or uninvited, right? It's an annoyance. Like, there's something that's just there. That's just like, I can't shake this. This is not good. And that's probably some of the feelings that we feel as believers, where it's like,
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know how to approach this subject. I don't, there might be a conflict on the other side of this conversation, or if people really knew how I believe, they would not want me around, right? That would be a form of persecution. There's that irritation, that presence there. A great kind of definition, though, I did see is that persecution is the clash between two irreconcilable value systems. So you have the kingdom of God, right? Everything we've been talking about, everything that he views as what it means to be a believer, what it means to follow him. And then you have the world.
Yeah.
And how a lot of the stuff where it's like, oh, die to self. And, well, that opposes greatly the idea of, like, the deeper side of, like, self-care and putting yourself first, right? Like, there's a tension there. There's a tension between offering forgiveness in moments that, or in situations that maybe feel like it'd be really hard to forgive, and yet we're told, the world would say, you don't have to forgive that person. Right. It's okay to hate that person. They're a bad, like, right? So there's those are really simple examples, but there's a tension there.
100%.
And one needs the other. Like, the world needs God, but as we know, the world in many ways rejects God.
Oh, absolutely.
And so there you have the kind of the I don't want to use the word truest form, but you have that baseline of that's persecution. That's what we're talking about. There's this situation or an issue that is just tension.
Well, and in that definition, there's a really cool word. You said it represents an irreconcilable difference.
Yep.
And I think that's important for Christians to grasp. Jesus is telling us this throughout his ministry. The world will never be reconciled with God or righteousness until Jesus comes back again.
Yep.
The world will never blend. The world will never get it. The world will never just be better.
Yeah.
And so there tends to be this shock and awe response from Christians every time something gets maybe a little bit worse, or a decision is made, or a law is passed. And I'm not saying we should be happy about it or be ignorant to it, but there is this level where I think Jesus is saying, like, listen, I've been preparing you for this. I told you this would happen.
Yeah.
Be ready. Be prepared to handle the persecution. They hated me. They're going to hate you.
Yeah.
And it is here. It is present. And it is something that is interesting that it rattles us. Like, our lives are not threatened.
Yeah.
In the big scheme of things, comparatively to other Christians around the world, we are not really persecuted.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
But yet we still allow the persecution to affect us, just like what you were saying. Like, oh, what if I lose this relationship? What if I'm viewed differently at work?
Yeah.
What if I miss out on our promotion? What if my neighbors don't invite me to the neighborhood block party? I mean, all these things, we literally are listing these as costs that may be too great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of feel like that's kind of the nature of American Christianity, is that we are really looking for a place where can we just have a place where the world can reconcile with God, so this is easier.
Yeah.
Man, we would love for following Jesus to be so much easier.
Yeah.
And there's nothing about it that's easy. None of these things that he lists in the Beatitudes are easy.
Yeah.
It's all very, very difficult, and it's upside down when you compare it to the normal day-to-day functions and philosophies and perspectives of the world.
Yeah.
And so therefore, get ready. And I feel like that's kind of what he's saying here.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly right. It's again, it's not a if, it is a when. Mm-hmm. It's the idea that, like, hey, this you are and are going to experience this if you follow me. That's the, air quotes, cost of following Jesus is the idea of things might be uncomfortable, and uncomfortable in a way that, like you said, it really isn't. Nothing will compare to what is waiting for you in heaven. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us, again, for those of us who are, listening from America and in this space, nothing that we actually can compare to what some others might be experiencing either.
Right.
It's almost like persecution is just a really big inconvenience.
Yeah.
It's kind of the vibe almost of it.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I'm not trying to be bashing on Christians. I think we just have to identify the realities of what's happening. Droves of Christians fold under the inconvenience of Jesus. Mm-hmm. That is really one of the great deterrents, is that Jesus becomes incredibly inconvenient to their life, or the world's response becomes an inconvenience to their life.
Yeah. That's
the level of persecution we're falling to. What happens when this gets real?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying from a guy like, I'm ready. I've not been through it either.
Yeah.
But I do believe that if we're not kind of, cutting our chops on this level of persecution and strengthening our faith, the Bible talks about, blessed are those, or it's a joy to go through trials.
Yeah.
Because trials lead to endurance. And I think what we're being told there is like, hey, utilize this. This is kind of like training. So kind of like back to the athletic thing.
Yeah.
You don't just decide one day, I'm going to go run a marathon or a half marathon.
Yeah.
You begin your training and you run shorter distances. You build up your endurance and your strength so you can go to that next level. And I think now we are in the endurance portion of the church.
Yeah, I think it's accurate. Yeah. And there's a part of the training it's not fun. It's not easy. It doesn't always feel like it's worth it. And so there's many days of just like, why am I doing this? But as you said, it's the long run. It's the refiner's fire, right? That's what we're talking about. Like the trash and the no good is being burned or melted away to produce something that's of greater value.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that's what we're walking through. And I think, through studying and preparation for this message, and I even used the example on Sunday, like persecution is not, I think sometimes we get it twisted, and this is just, I just found this so funny because you hear it all the time, but we're not really talking about the person who's sitting on the corner, at Cherry Festival, if you're in Traverse City, with the picket sign telling everyone they're going to hell if they don't believe, which is, he's not wrong, but it's like yelling in someone's face and being a jerk. And then when that guy gets told to be quiet or to go home, he is not being persecuted for righteousness' sake. He's being, and I shouldn't say just they are being persecuted for, I don't know, being weird, being obnoxious. Like, it's
at the very least a very poor method to share the gospel.
Yeah. And that's where we, back to the example of Jesus, like there's something so good about relationship that comes with sharing the gospel. And that's kind of just, we could go off and tangent episode of that, but just that reality of, yes, that is a form of persecution, but there's this reality of, I think for a lot of us, it's really easy to get it twisted of, I'm just not liked. So boo-hoo. And like you said, I'm going to walk away from this, or we start questioning it, or we start, and I don't know, that can just, I can see how it happens, but that can become really twisted really quick. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important distinctive what you were just describing, because there are people for sure who will, who they're going to suffer or pay the consequences for a choice they've made.
Yeah.
But that's not what this is talking about. Like, if you make a bad decision and then there's consequences, well, you're not being persecuted.
Yeah.
And you could be persecuted for things that have nothing to do with God.
Yep.
But this is very distinctly saying for those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for my sake. And so, great example of the guy standing there, on the street corner. You can set yourself up, and then now you become like a self-proclaimed martyr.
Yeah.
But, if you're going to put a sign like that on your shoulders and go picket and yell at people driving down the road, and then someone throws their Slurpee at you, you're not persecuted. You're just doused in Slurpee. I mean,
no, 100%.
You kind of asked for
100%. It. And I think too, like there's this reality of a line for us of like, if we're honest, persecution and some of that stuff that even happens within the church itself. Sure. And I think that was almost like the most disheartening part of a lot of this, I think, is how much damage do we do to one another within the church, because a lot of times, like, and I shared a story about my buddy Joe, who in college, I was just convinced he was just doing better than me. Like, he was going to be a better pastor than me. And I just didn't like the guy.
Yeah.
I sound stupid saying that out loud, but like there was like a legitimate, like,
no, I got you.
There was that tension there of just like, wow, that guy's just going to be better than me. He's smarter than me. And so like, I like almost had this mini mission for a set amount of time to like, I'm just not going to like this person, and anything they do that seems epic, I'm just not going to be a fan of. And I didn't like find his weakness one day and then be like, oh, okay, cool. Like now I can like the guy. It was just this reality check of like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like what am I doing?
Yeah.
But I think if we're honest, that's a huge issue within the church though too, is sometimes we think people are more ahead of us or in love with Jesus more than us, or like God seems to be blessing them more. And it's like, we almost got to check ourselves too of, are we destroying this thing from the inside out because of this idea of being better than someone or not as good as someone? And so I don't know. I think that's a important thing to speak to, because it's not just from the outside that we face persecution. Like there has to be an awareness of what we're saying and who we're talking about and how we're talking about people and how we view other believers, because we can do just as much damage to ourselves. Friendly fire
is just as deadly, right?
Yeah.
And I think persecution is present anytime there is opposition present. And opposition, like you said, it can come from inside, it can come from outside. Yeah. And I think that is probably where we're hitting the front line of this battle the most, is that the church, now more than ever, I would say in America, we're facing much more open opposition to our beliefs, to following Jesus.
Yeah.
It's vocal, it's accepted, it's encouraged. And I think what makes it hard and hurtful, and where we feel it the most is that people are not just challenging what we believe, but they're saying that because of how we believe, we don't truly love people and we don't truly understand God and all these things that are completely false.
Yeah.
But it's making us angry.
Yeah.
It's making us rattled. I hope it's not, but I imagine for some, it's maybe making you question and doubt.
Yeah.
And then we begin to see people soften their stance on biblical truth and slowly give in, slowly soften those lines and conform. And that's giving into persecution.
Yeah.
Persecution is the person that is angry at us because we won't just agree with whatever the choices they're making.
Yeah.
Well, that is a form of persecution. So do we stand our ground? And what's the cost level? I mean, I've had conversations recently with 2 or 3 different families that are in similar spots, is that their family is being kind of torn apart from the inside over biblical lines, particularly having to do with gender and sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And there are parents that I've met with that are actually losing the relationship with one of their children over this because they're refusing to back off of their biblical beliefs. That's hard to imagine. And I'm not saying that they're happy about it, but at the same time, I'm just kind of a little bit in awe of like, wow, that's standing your ground.
Yeah.
You know, when Jesus says, you must leave your father, your mother, your kids, he's not saying literally go leave them, but he's saying like when push comes to shove and that line is drawn in the sand, what side of that line are you going to jump on?
Yeah.
And I'm just watching some of these families show up me what it's like that in the most difficult scenarios, they are still choosing Jesus.
Yeah. Wild.
That's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, we watch some Christians who crumble and fold over the thought of being defriended on Facebook or Instagram. I mean, I watch some Christians like, it took that for you to give in?
Yeah.
Really? Like that was a spitball. That wasn't even a bullet.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And I think that's where this is so, I'm not afraid of persecution. I'm not afraid of whatever's coming down the pipe our way.
Mm-hmm.
It may be in our lifetime. It may not. I don't know. I think my fear is more for how's the church going to respond?
Yeah.
How many are going to just fall away? The Bible says a lot. The Bible talks about in times, many will fall away in these times of trial. So what are we doing now to prepare ourselves?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think that's hopefully what came across on Sunday was this idea of if we're honest, we can't do it by ourselves.
Right.
Like, and we see it in Scripture, like it's okay to admit that I can't do this. Because then that goes back to the idea of being a disciple and the reliance that comes from God, us relying on Him.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's really, really easy to say that sitting here in our podcast studio and whatnot, just be like, then push comes to shove, just follow God. But it really is like, that's what we're being called to, though.
Yeah.
Like, because again, he's Jesus, and all this isn't shying away from the fact that this is going to come. This should be expected. It is happening. So will you go back to what we just all worked through and see that as the cornerstone of what you're doing, of what your life is built on, right? He is the cornerstone. Are you seeing it as your life is actually built on Him?
Yeah.
So that when push does come to shove, you can say, yeah, my home is built on the rock, and my foundation is that of Christ, and not just easily shaken, easily broken.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So many of the iconic illustrations that Jesus gives us come right out of these Beatitudes.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the things are part of this Sermon on the Mount and the teachings directly following that we go back to. And when we see it in the big picture, in light of this foundation, because that's what these are. These are the foundations of being a disciple. And then He moves into other things. Then He moves into salt of the earth, be a light on the hill, let your light shine for everybody to see. That's what happens with all of this. Your light is being seen. Some people are going to love it, some are going to hate it. And then He also, He moves, before too long into the wise and foolish builders.
Yeah.
And He does talk about, like, hey, you can be wise or foolish. It really is a choice.
Yeah.
The foolish builder was not a dummy. He wasn't just some poor schmuck out there that didn't know better and was just throwing some sticks in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't. I mean, if you look at the text and kind of look at it kind of pragmatically, it's like, okay, both of them were trained builders.
Yeah.
Both of them had all the skills, knowledge, and abilities the exact same. They were the same person.
He built a home. Like
he built a home.
It wasn't a shack. Like he built
Right.
a home. Yeah.
They were the exact same person until they had a choice to make.
Yeah.
One chose to do the hard work of building on the rock. The other chose the easy path of building on the sand.
Mm.
That's what made him foolish, was the choice.
Yeah.
Not what God had given him or not given him, not his mental capacity. That was none of that. He was every bit the same as the other guy until the choice was made.
Yeah.
And Jesus is saying, hey, this is going to be a choice. And I think back to Joshua at the end of his life when he calls all the people together and he knows his days are numbered.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, hey, listen, choose for yourselves. Some of you choose the gods of Egypt that we are familiar with. Some of you, choose the gods of this new land we're in. But as for me and my house,
Yeah.
we will serve the Lord.
Yeah.
The choice, you're making your choice. But he's just saying, like, listen, we're not victims here.
Yeah.
There are no victims in Christianity. We have chosen our path.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so hopefully the push then is, would you choose joy in the midst of your persecution then? If you know it's coming, you know what to expect, you've made this choice, you've made the bed, are you going to get it? And within that then choose joy.
Yeah.
And choose to rejoice in the fact that it's like, again, we're told in Matthew, like the prophets, they were the ones they also experienced persecution. Guys like Daniel, who is literally praying to himself. Like there's a law that says he can't pray that was made to basically stop him from praying. So he goes in private, gets set up, gets thrown in the lion's den. We don't see him cursing God. We don't see him choosing okay, I can't pray.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. Like
I take it back.
Yeah, I'm kidding. No. It was just like he chose that in that moment, okay, like this is still like, this is what my life is about. I'm going to focus on this.
Yeah.
And he was choosing God. And I think that's the push, is like in the end, choosing God is choosing joy, is choosing to see it, is to count it all his blessing of the fact of like, okay, I'm experiencing this because I'm following Jesus.
And I think the book of Daniel is such a great one for us to even follow these days, because the entire book, the entire book talks about these type of situations, because even his peers, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the exact same scenario. Like, listen, bow down and worship another god or else.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, we choose or else.
Yeah.
And even standing at the cusp of the furnace that had been heated 7 times hotter and burning, killed the guards that were there. They didn't sign up for that. They're like, listen, our God's going to take care of us. And even if he doesn't, that's such a key phrase. They were like, listen, we believe our God can save us from this fire, but even if he doesn't, we know where this goes. We know how this story ends. Yeah. And there was peace. We talked about peace last week. There was peace beyond the understanding, like what we read in Philippians 4. There was peace that shouldn't have been there. Yeah,
100%.
Because there is this commitment to the eternal promises that were given.
Yeah.
And that is so hard. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's hard to continue to put our mindset into that heavenly mindset, that eternal realm. Yeah. But none of this works without that.
Yeah, 100%.
We don't endure persecution at its heaviest weight without a solid faith and belief in those eternal promises.
Yeah. And persecution shows your faith.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if you're not being persecuted, like, you know what I mean? If you're not experiencing some sort of tension in your life from you being a believer, then it's like, and again, I'm not one questioning your salvation. I'm just saying it, but it speaks to, like, it would definitely show your faith. Like, and so.
Yeah, I'd imagine there's a lot of Christians out there that would have to, maybe even admit to themselves that they've been really good covert operatives.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, I'm a Secret Service Christian. I'm undercover.
Yeah.
You're not called to be undercover.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
You're not called for that.
Don't put the light under a basket. Like, no. So it's like, I think there's, but I think you're right, though. I think that's, again, anything we've seen, it's like there is something to, and we've said it on this podcast, we've said it during this study, like choosing to be a disciple, choosing to be, taught by Jesus and to follow him and be a believer in him. You are not signing up for the 10-day cruise. You are signing up to go sail in the North Sea, and it's going to be chaotic. And it's like, but that's the reality of, like, in the end, we know what all this leads to. And we know that that he has a plan for it, and we can trust that there's more to come. That best is yet to come, and that stuff. And a lot of times, what that looks like is just when we get to heaven with him.
Absolutely.
And so, I don't know. I think it's worth taking heart in the fact that, like, yep, persecution is going to come. You should expect it. You're probably experiencing it. Some kind of annoyance, some kind of irritant, some kind of thing that just a presence that won't go away. That seems to be this tension in your life since you made that choice to follow Jesus. And it's like, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
Like, count it as joy and follow him harder.
Yeah. And maybe that deeper question too of, if you're not sure you've ever experienced persecution, well, how out loud is your faith? I'm not saying jump on the table at work and scream at people. Don't go put the sandwich board sign on. I'm not a believer in any of that as a good method for getting the gospel out there. But I believe that in our world, you begin to do things that are righteous, right in the eyes of God in your decisions. So that means with your honesty, your integrity, your work ethic, your refusal to be sucked into poor conversations, either jokes or gossip or slander, whatever. The lines in the sand we draw around ourselves in our everyday existence, you will begin to stand out.
Yeah.
You will begin to notice that one of these kids is not like the others.
Yeah.
And one of two things is going to happen in that scenario. One side of it is, yes, you very well will experience some form of persecution.
Yep.
Whether it's just people talking down to you, making fun of you, calling you, religious fanatic, whatever. But here's the other side that could happen. Somebody watching you that has recognized the void in their life, that there is a deep need in their soul. They see that you might have what they're looking for, and they're going to come ask you, why are you so different?
Yeah.
There's the beautiful side of it. And that could be happening in the midst of persecution. And we'll never experience those moments, if we're so afraid of the persecution that we live our Christian walk quietly and under a shield or under a shade.
Yeah.
But let that light shine. Be the salt. Keep in mind everything before this and all the Beatitudes. We're doing this with high levels of mercy and pure of heart, and we're doing this with gentleness. All the fruits of the Spirit, kindness. All these things are flowing out of us. So we're not being arrogant. We're not being jerks about it, but we're doing it boldly, unapologetically, and it's going to bring attention from two sides.
Yeah.
And both are going to lead to good things. But it's never going to happen if we decide now that persecution is not what I signed up for.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
no, it's a good kind of ender to this series that we work through, and I think I hope for people, whether they listened on Sunday or they've followed up listening to this or whatever it's been, I hope they see the real truth and just the amazingness that comes with following God.
Yeah.
And really being a disciple of his, and whether it's through the first 7 and then finishing with the 8th, of the idea of, okay, this is what you've done, this is the choice you've made, this is what to expect, but he's right there with you along the way.
Absolutely, 100%. And you don't have to do it alone. That's the cool thing. We get to do it together.
Yeah.
And if you're listening and you're part of Bayview, just know that we're so blessed to have you part of our church family. If you're listening and you're not part of a church family anywhere, doesn't have to be us. But man, find a community of people that are standing firm on the Bible, ready to go take the gospel to people, and they're there to do it together. You need that.
Yeah.
And we live in a weird time right now where we are almost 4 years removed from COVID, which is crazy that it's been that long now. But the resonating effects are there. And one of the effects that I think we've been talking about even as a church staff is how many people have found comfort in the digital underground.
Yeah.
And they've isolated. And they watch church from home, and many people work from home, and they're losing sight of that we're made for companionship, we're made for each other.
Yeah.
And so that's not a ploy to get you to come to our church, but it is a ploy or a plea find a community of believers. You need that. We all need that.
That's good.
And then we follow Jesus. We're disciples together. Jesus didn't pick one.
Mm-hmm.
He even picked 12.
Yeah.
They needed each other.
Yeah.
And we need each other.
Yeah. 100%.
Cool. Well, hey, I'm excited. In the coming weeks, we're going to have some guests coming back on the podcast. We're going to be talking through a variety of topics. It has been really cool doing these Beatitudes these last 8 weeks.
Yeah.
It's been a good dive for me, and I know for you. Like, I've enjoyed just our conversations on it.
Yeah, it's been really good.
And so hope you have enjoyed it as well. Don't miss a single episode of the Bayview Podcast. You can hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, and that way you never miss a new episode. Until then, we will be right here next week and every week after that. This is Chris. This is Andrew. Thanks for being with us today on the Bayview Podcast. We will see you next time around.